at what age did you realize you were going to have some success beyond, or that you could become a professional? It would be, something you could do for a living at some point. When did you come to that realization?
Since birth.
These kids would get $300,000. They'd have $300,000 worth of a good time, and then, April of next year, Uncle Sam's knocking on the door, going, "Where's my cut?" And they're like, "Uh-oh."
I remember I didn't have a car when I got drafted, and one of my teammates came to pick me up in his Bentley to drop me off at the hotel, and I'm like, I get in, I'm like, wow, a Bentley. And then he drops me off. I'm like, so what does it do that makes it so special? And the guy's like, nothing. Just get out.
All right, get on with it.
All right, everybody, welcome back to our latest edition of Bugle Notes, where we sound off on the topics that we feel like people are interested in hearing about, learning about, as it relates to money and markets. And this one's a little different from some of the other conversations that we've had in the past. We've got two illustrious guests joining Michael and I today. So we've got our very own Heinecke, and then we're blessed to have Jeremiah Attaochu join us today. So both former sports stars in their own respect. But today we're talking about relationships with money. So just some quick background. So we'll go to Hayes first. So Hayes' dad and I are good buddies, play golf together. And so Hayes interned for us a year and a half ago? When was that?
It was
a year ago?
A year and a half ago, yeah.
Wow. And was tenacious and earned his way into a role here at Reveille Wealth Management after a stint with the Cardinals.
That's right.
Jerry, you and I, we met, a couple years ago?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think we got introduced by somebody who was in the AT fund, the fundraising arm at Georgia Tech,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Developed a relationship from there. So I appreciate you driving down to spend a little time with us today.
I think you left some details off there.
Yeah.
So Georgia Tech legend?
Georgia Tech legend.
4-year starter.
Yep.
All-time sack leader.
Boom.
At Georgia Tech. 31 and a half sacks over your 4-year career, right? Drafted second round 2014 to the San Diego Chargers. 9-year NFL career. 2017 Chargers Walter Payton Man of the Year. Hell of a career, man.
Thank you.
Hey, how many of those sacks came the freshman year? Because dude came out swinging. He came out swinging.
I think maybe like 3.
You think it was only 3?
Maybe like 3.
We're gonna have to look that up.
So I remember freshman year, right? You got this kid making noise off the left side, right? Wow. Now you're a little smaller freshman year though, right? What'd you come? You were like
I was like 220, 218.
Yeah.
6'3", 6'2", yeah.
And by the time you left, where were you?
245.
Okay.
Yeah.
All muscle.
Yeah. But I'm telling you, I remember even though he was small, freshman year he was disruptive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you'd always hear Wes Durham on the call back then, right? Talking about Attaochu, right? That was awesome. A lot of great memories.
Good old Wes.
So what do you? Let's talk about the teams that you played on, because your freshman year was 2010.
2010.
Okay.
So they were coming off of
Orange
Orange
Bowl
Bowl
lost
and
to Iowa.
Lost to Iowa.
That was rough.
Georgia Tech was out there, and I was from DC. Shout out to Al Groh, who was recruiting me to Virginia. Got the job at Tech, and he brought me down. So Georgia Tech was a place that I chose because of good academics and like a good football program. I didn't necessarily want to be in the city of Atlanta.
Yep.
Because I grew up in D.C., so I wanted to go to a college town and get away from the city life.
Yep.
But it worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're on campus though at Tech, you may not necessarily know that you're in the middle of a big city, right?
Yeah.
But all right, so Al Groh brings you down. So tell us quickly about your relationship with Paul Johnson.
My relationship with Paul Johnson was very so he's the offensive coach mind at the time, of course, and I'm on defense, so it was very high and by. And I remember when I committed to Georgia Tech, I was like, hey, I'm going to commit. And he's like, okay. It wasn't like a big celebration, or he was just like stale face, like, okay.
Yeah.
So that's our relationship.
Yeah. I mean, I love Paul Johnson, and I think that in today's world, if he was still coaching in this post NIL world, and we'll get to that in a little bit. To me, he's just an old school football coach where he could have been a high school football coach. I know he was before he was coaching collegiately, where he could show up, and if they said, these are your players, he'd be like, okay, I'll make a team out of that. Yeah. And so, I think that engaging maybe with the recruits and everything wasn't necessarily his forte, because he was just an old school guy trying to draw X's and O's.
Exactly.
Yeah,
he did a lot of great things for our program.
Yep.
So, all right, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I think where I kind of want to start on the topic, and we want to talk about the relationship that people have to money, what it's like for folks growing up, what it's like when folks come into money, and so athletes in particular have a unique perspective on this. So why don't you just give us an idea? We're going to go both of you here. We'll start with you, Hayes. Growing up, what was it like in your household? Did your family talk about money? Did you was money tight? Was it not a problem? Did you learn about it early on? Was it a focus in your family? So tell us what it was like for you growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it didn't exactly, everything didn't revolve around money. But, my parents worked very hard. They both had, advanced degrees and tried their hardest to get into a career path that they enjoyed doing, that was purposeful, and that was going to, provide them a quality of life that, they could carry on to the next generation, right? That was my influence. It was never, the sole focus of life in itself. But having access to the best school systems, to the best education, to the best food, all those things kind of compound, and that was instilled in me at a young age.
How about you? I mean, you immigrated to the U.S. when you were how old?
8 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. So my dad was an exchange student, University of Wisconsin Stout, and he got his degree and went back to Nigeria, met my mom, they got married, and my mom was very, her dad was a university administrator, so they were very progressive as far as education. And so when my parents met, they started a family, and my dad lost his job, and then he relocated back to the U.S. and worked for a few years, but his status, I know right now immigration is a big conversation, his status, I think he was on like a working visa for a church. So he did that for like 3 years. He wasn't able to get a job that fit more of his criteria as far as his degree. But in that whole process of moving to DC in 2001, DC was kind of coming off of the late 90s crack cocaine epidemic. So DC, I pretty much moved into the hood. And I think for us, we didn't really have much. We lived in the attic of a church for a while. Then we ended up renting a house from somebody. But I think for us, it was more the values that we placed around family, community, having a routine every week, going to church, every week, and building that community for us was what kept us out of trouble more than it was resources. I remember our church was going to Six Flags. It was like $7 at the time to go to Six Flags. And I remember I was in a car ride home with my mom, and I'm like, Mom, all the kids are going to Six Flags, and you can't even give us $7. And my mom is like, but in that moment, I know she wanted to go to the grocery store and buy some food for the week. And she was like, all right, we put that pressure on her as kids, because kids, you don't really understand, the mountains your parents are climbing for you on the daily. So being able to experience that and see my parents struggle and, me have to, convince my mom to do things like that really allowed me to have a different perspective on money, as far as it just being something to maybe just help my parents or help my family. Yeah.
And, I guess, did you work when you were, in high school, in college, all of that? Did you have that growing up?
I started working when I was 13. So the DC government had a program at the time. It was a summer job program. So every summer, to keep the kids kind of active, we would get a job. So I had a job at the DC Court of Appeals. So I'm like 13 years old. I'm getting dressed up, working with all these adults, and they're talking on their lunch break, and I'm filing papers, and I'm super dedicated, super hardworking. I was making like $300 a week.
Wow.
But that money was like my parents was adding up for the rent.
Yeah.
So from that age, I realized that it was a collective. Like, I had to do my part as a kid, and I think that's more speaks to me, my character, more than anything, because I always felt like I'm doing this for
the family.
For the family.
Yeah.
I mean, I worked all throughout high school and college, and I remember like any of the money that I made working in high school went straight into an account. My dad you had to save it. I had an E-Trade account when I was 16. So,
Wow.
But there was always that savings mentality for me growing up, and it sounds like for you it was all back into the family.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember my dad, telling me and my sister, like when we turned 16 and we could drive, he was like, if you're driving, you're going to have a job. And I remember I got my first job, I think I was 15. I was working at a golf course in a cart barn, and he would have to take me back and forth. But like as soon as I turned 16, he's like, you're going to be driving yourself here. And I remember his comment to me was like, we were going to get a job not because we necessarily had to have one, but he was like, I'll be damned if my kids don't know the value of a dollar, right? That, if you're going to ask me for, $50, $75 for a pair of jeans or whatever it is, you need to understand what goes in to being able to make that amount of money. And it's not like I'm not just an ATM machine handing you something out, that there's going to be an exchange of your time and your effort to be able to earn some money for you to be able to spend. That's what makes this whole thing go around. So,
what about you? You're awful quiet over there.
Yeah, I was reminiscing about what exactly my first job was. On paper, it was probably my buddy's moving company that, we were playing football, and after summer workouts, we would grab a U-Haul and go move furniture for houses around the communities and whatnot. Let's see. I worked a lot of odd jobs. I worked on a cattle farm for 2 years. My last 2 years of high school. It was actually a funny story.
I can see that. A is the farmer. Okay.
Yeah, crazy. I got connected with a young lady out in Newton whose husband, interesting story, flew helicopters to oil rigs. So he would be gone like 6 months out of the year. And she was an equestrian, so she loved to ride horses and whatnot, but she didn't want to, take care of the property and whatnot that went into it. So I spent 2 summers, shoveling hay and fighting water moccasins and snakes and whatnot and keeping them away from the horses. But yeah,
love it.
Wow.
Yeah. So for the two of you growing up, I mean, obviously you were involved in sports from somewhat of a young age, at least high school before. Did you? At what age did you realize you were going to have some success beyond, or that you could become a professional? It would be, something you could do for a living at some point. When did you come to that realization?
Since birth.
Just came out of the womb,
Yeah.
throwing rockets.
That's right.
Okay.
No, I'm joking. Go ahead, Jerry.
I mean, a professional is steep. That's a steep climb. So, but from a young age, I definitely showed a lot of like competitive energy. So with the older kids, racing, always wanted to be first, getting hurt all the time. It was just kind of, activity was like ingrained in my blood. When I realized I could make it to the NFL was my second year in Georgia Tech.
Okay.
and the team superlatives was most likely to be an NFL star. And I guess I've been tearing it up all camp, and everybody voted me.
Wow.
So from that moment, I was like, oh, wow, everybody's recognizing it. So, yeah.
So what was your first experience with, seeing somebody with real money, whether it was an athlete or whether it was, professional otherwise? Like, when did you first run into somebody that had made it, and you either thought, I want to be that guy, or I don't want to be that guy, or give me your first real experience if you can remember it.
Yeah, for me, it was definitely the latter years of high school and into college. Not necessarily playing, but the off-season training. Whenever I would come back home, Peachtree City's kind of got a history of having some good athletes. So in the off-season, I would come home and I was a college kid. I played in the Southern Conference, not huge. I had one offer out of college. But I would come home and I would train with these big leaguers. Will Smith, for example, he's got 3 World Series championships. Plenty of guys with multiple years of big league time, and that they do well money wise. But being around those guys and being able to see how you measure up to it, and being exposed to the habits that they have, to become a professional. That was my first real exposure to it.
How about you?
Yeah, I'd say exposure or proximity, probably at Georgia Tech, working out and walking out and seeing Calvin Johnson sitting in the locker room, ready to do his work.
He did okay in the NFL, right?
He did very well in the NFL. Seeing him sitting in the locker room, his demeanor, his work ethic, he'll go in there by himself and just lift and do his whole routine. And I was like 18, 17 at the time, so seeing like a 24, 25-year-old man in a position where I want to be, and then walking outside the locker room and seeing a hatchback Ferrari. So I'm like, wow, this guy's, the world is his playground. So
Yeah.
if you work hard, this is the type of lifestyle, you carry yourself with a certain demeanor. This is this type of lifestyle that you can possibly live. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like both of you had reasonably good experiences there, and that you had decent role models and the folks Calvin Johnson, how could you pick a better guy, right?
Exactly.
For the things that he's done even beyond school. So the part of the reason I think we wanted to discuss the topic in the first place is that everybody knows the stats, right? The NFL in particular. They say almost 80% of guys that go into the NFL experience some kind of financial hardship, usually within 2 years of retiring. And part of it could be due to the fact that they've got short careers. The average career of the NFL is 3.5 years. So what do you think are some of the things that kind of lead to that? I mean, you guys have obviously had this experience, in being professional athletes. So what is it that you think causes somebody to end up in that position? Profound question.
That's a good one. I feel like there's a lot of things, but I'd probably cite the lack of education. I mean, when you give an 18-year-old kid a $1 million signing bonus, they've never touched that type of money before. They don't understand taxes. They don't understand, withholdings. They don't understand. They've probably never formed any sort of budget, and yeah, it can be the biggest blessing in your life, but also the biggest curse.
So for a lot of professional athletes, for most people, they're gonna, when they're 18 to 25, they're just getting started. They're gonna make 5% or less of their cumulative lifetime earnings. Mm-hmm. For an athlete, they may make 90% of their career lifetime earnings by the time they're 25 years old. And so it stands everything on its head from a societal norm. And I'm sure it's hard to say, you want to taste the benefits of the lifestyle that you could potentially afford yourself, but at the same time, you can get out over your skis pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, so you have some success. How do you handle that, and how do you deal with the peer pressure to not go out and spend it all? I mean, you got all these guys around you with all the money in the world. How do you deal with that?
I think for starters, it's like I said, the values around how you were brought up are very important. For me, going into the NFL at 21 years old, and being around a bunch of guys with Bentleys and, Range Rovers and everything in the parking lot, every car in the lot was over $75K. For me, that was like, wow. Like, I remember I didn't have a car when I got drafted, and one of my teammates came to pick me up in his Bentley to drop me off at the hotel. And I'm like, I get in, I'm like, wow, a Bentley. And then he drops me off. I'm like, so what does it do that makes it so special? And the guy's like, nothing. Just get out. So I'm like, so I think it's the value that you place on things. I think when you get into that lifestyle, the money's coming in fast. And if you value material things, that's what you're going to go for. If you value investments and like property and things like that, that's what you go for. I would say the one thing that makes a lot of guys lose, what they come in with is, for one, not having the sight to see what's down the road. Whether your career is long or short, I was blessed to have a 9-year career. Some guys, not so long. Some guys were first-round picks, didn't get past 2 years. So you can think about those millions coming in and how you're projecting the money you're going to make. They're making you spend money. You're going to rookie dinners, spending 10, 15 grand. So you're not conceptualizing how much it is that's going out.
What about the tailors that are showing up in the locker room?
That I've bought the $3,000 suits, and because everybody's buying them, and it's one guy gets it into the locker room. So there's a lot of little distractions here and there, but I think having your base, like knowing who you are and knowing what you're there for, and having like principles on like investing and money is very important at a young age.
Yeah, you said something that intrigued me there, that you have this assumption, or these guys have this assumption coming in that it's always going to be that way. Somebody might have a 2-year career where they thought it was going to be a 10-year career, and so they thought they were going to make X, and they only end up making a lot less than that. And, it's something that we deal with constantly in our business, particularly right now. The stock market's been, straight up for so long that everybody goes in with the assumption that it's always going to be this way. So that's a bias that a lot of people have, whether it's in earnings or investing or whatever it might be. And so it's something, we deal with constantly. But
let me ask just a quick question, maybe a little bit of a derivation of topic here. But when you see you'll see somebody come in, whether it's baseball, it could be basketball, football, that they make all the talent in the world, and they get they have a really nice contract when they start out, and they're a star. They have all the promise in the world, but they're trying to get, like, their objective seems to be, I'm going to get a max contract. And as soon as they get that max contract, it's almost like their performance wanes after that. Like, there have been very few people who have gotten that max contract and continue to perform at that elite level, because maybe for them it was never about the money, right? Do you agree that is that the way that it goes oftentimes, or not?
Yeah, I'll speak on it. I think I personally have the opinion that, like, subconsciously as a human being, it's virtually impossible for an athlete to maintain that level of hunger even after something like that. Like, you think about, Conor McGregor, for example, came in the game on welfare, whatnot, made his $100 million, never lost a fight, and, then he gets swept by everybody as soon as he's got the lifestyle, he's got the parties, he's got what he wants. There are people who don't care about the money, and they want to be in the Hall of Fame, and they want to accomplish great things. But yeah, I'd maintain the assumption. I wouldn't know from experience, but if somebody signed a 9-figure contract, I'd probably find it hard to believe that they could maintain that sort of hunger.
You agree with that?
I agree with that. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So, tell me about I guess your experiences with professional advice, right? Were there folks that were readily available to you when you first started out? How does the NFL handle that? Do they offer you financial services that you can get access to, or is it something you had to find on your own? Did people come out of the woodwork and come to you? Were you skeptical of those folks? Just give us your experience on that kind of stuff.
Probably about 6 months before the draft is when the phone calls start coming in. All the big investment banks, financial advisors in the area, players' agents. I started shopping around for agents about 6 months before the draft, and that was usually one of the first questions that I had for an agent, was what resources are available to me. I was a finance major, and I knew what my background was and the habits, surrounding money that I had. But I just wanted to know because personally I think that kids should be picking agents based on, how well are those agents going to take care of your entire situation. I know a lot of guys who, looking back, who made the right decision. They picked an agent who had either a financial advisor on retainer, who worked within the firm, who they themselves had the background in money management, or they knew somebody who could say, this is a guy, you can trust him, he works with plenty of guys just like you, here's his phone number.
Yeah. Similar for you?
Similar for me. Like Hayes said, there was a flurry, right before I got drafted, of calls from financial guys and agents. I think for me, mostly as far as like picking the agent, it was more of like proximity, like who was around me. And at the time, I'm 20 years old, easily influenced. So the older people that I had around me were the ones that would kind of like push me to certain people. What I will say is, in going on the circuit, going to the Senior Bowl, going to train going to the combine, these guys are going to be at the hotels. They're just, everybody's giving you their number. You're getting calls from unknown numbers. So it does kind of come all at once, and it's hard to decipher who's good and who's not. Then you hear the crazy stories about guys who, get money stolen from and things like that. I remember one of the agents that was recruiting me, he said, Jeremiah, what you're about to do, his son was actually getting drafted too that year. And he was like, what you're about to do is you're stepping into a room that's full of all the things you want in this world. He was like, but also in that room are wolves that are so you're young, you're 20 years old, you're about to sign $1 million contract, but you have to be mindful that you've become a target for anybody that wants to, come up. So, that was definitely a very, dangerous time for me, I'll say, for sure.
Well, and I feel like in that circumstance, right, those guys are professionals, right? The wolves, right? And they're the ones who are maybe going to tell you all the things that you want to hear about how, no, Jerry, we're not signing $1 million contract. We're signing a multi-million-dollar contract,
Yep.
right? And so they're saying things that are appealing to you, but it's really hard to know, right? It's you got to test the spirits on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this somebody that you can have, that you can trust, that you can rely on? And it's very hard to do that in a short period of time, because you probably have to make a decision in a relatively short period of time, right?
Yep, exactly.
And how do you filter out the folks that are, the wolves, if we're going to use that terminology? Is it, that you rely on your parents or whoever's advising you to try to help pick somebody, or is it just gut feel, or how do you figure out who the hell you should be working with?
Yeah, so I interviewed about 6 different agencies prior to the draft. They
you always start with the agent, and then kind of everybody, financial professionals are kind of ancillary to that. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
So,
It all kind of falls under the same umbrella. But yeah, I still remember sitting in my living room with my parents and having, I had a firm come from Vegas. I had guys coming from California, and even guys here locally. Sat down with the family, see how they interact. see how personable they are, because most of the time it's your first time meeting these people in person for the first time, and it's like, let me get to know you before I sign the next 5 years of my life away to you. So yeah, I probably interviewed about 6 different agencies, talked to anybody that I knew that already had an agent or worked with those people, and tried to form some sort of reputation. And I'd say the bigger agencies in baseball, I don't know how it is with football exactly, but the bigger agencies, better reputation, word of mouth. If they've been around for quite some time, you've got something to look at, right?
Yeah.
So, something I'm really curious about, you hear horror stories about, athletes and their relationship with their family suffering in a lot of cases because of, you coming into money or, for whatever other reasons. Did you guys experience any issues with family? Did you know of any other athletes that had issues that, people coming out of the woodwork looking for money or whatever it might have been? Tell us about your own experience. Tell us about any other experiences you might have seen.
I'll say personally with family, my family was pretty, hands off to say the least. They didn't see my success as theirs in any way or have any expectations of me. So I was blessed in that regard. Now, what did I notice and observe with other guys? There was a lot of, when you're the first person in your family to attain that level of success or wealth, there's going to be other people in your family that do see you as, somebody that's going to help them. And unfortunately, a lot of guys have big hearts and, they want to take care of everybody and do everything. But what I came to learn was that you have to make sure that you are overinvested in yourself, so you don't have just money sitting around to give away. So you lock it, whether you're buying real estate or you're investing, because if you keep the money around as a young person, there's a million things you can do. You have the energy, you have the women, you have a million things that you can do with that money as a young man. So I think the one thing I've seen was, for example, a guy, his fiance or the mother of his kids, he buys her something, maybe a car or a purse, and then this is one of the worst stories. And then the guy's mom is upset that she doesn't have a purse or she doesn't have a car as nice, and so it's everybody's constantly coming at you for something, and it's just having wisdom and moving with a certain level of understanding to be able to avoid those pitfalls.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about NIL. Obviously a big topic now. Money getting thrown all around younger and younger folks, it seems like nowadays. And, I've got my own opinions about it. But I'm curious, what your thoughts in general are. Do you think it was something that was deserved? These athletes definitely should be paid. Do you think there needs to be more structure than there is today? Just, what are your general thoughts on the way these programs are being implemented, kind of what the environment looks like today? Where do you think it's headed in the future too? I mean, it seems like it's something that ultimately might need to be regulated a little bit more than it is, but.
Yeah, no kidding. First thing to mind is I was born 5 years too soon, because some of the paychecks that these kids are walking away with, and everybody that I've talked to, it seems like it's only going up. I had a roommate, my first year pro ball, who was a 4-year starter at an SEC school, and I think they offered him about $50,000 to come back for his 5th year and play. And I've heard of freshmen stepping on campus at some of these SEC schools now in baseball, which isn't a revenue producing sport in most cases. And having mid 6 figures in their bank accounts before they play one single game.
That's unreal.
It's unreal, isn't it?
I keep saying I don't see how this is a market that regulates itself, because there's so much money going into it, and it seems like, particularly certain schools. I mean, you can throw out the Texas A&Ms of the world, where there's just so much money behind it. Where does it end?
Well, but I'll say for baseball, it's a little different for baseball, I think, versus football, because you would have kids that were 17, 18 years old that would get drafted straight into the big leagues and would have potentially a bunch of money dropped on them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That was never an option for football, right? You had to be 3 years in before you get drafted, right? Before that money was there. So now the prospect for getting money as a football player is happening 3 years earlier. I've heard some kids are getting paid NIL money in high school now, which is insane.
How do you regulate that? High school.
I guess you trust free market capitalism, right, to do so. But Jerry, what are your thoughts on NIL?
Like Hayes, I'm saying I'm a few years too late. So if I look at my contributions to like Georgia Tech from 2010 to 2013, and like the plays made and the sacks that I got. Now, I'm not trying.
You think you could put a number on it?
100%. 100%. The contributions that certain guys make and the sacrifices that they make in college for the team to have success, yes, they do deserve the money. They do deserve to get paid. There's guys out there that are playing with broken this, broken that, cortisone shot every week to play. So there's guys that are going through significantly more for that school to win. And I remember at Georgia Tech, we had guys that were like that were going having back problems and knee problems, but they're the best offensive linemen. They have to play, so they're putting a toll on their body that they can't get back, and they can't. A lot of them weren't able to transition to an NFL career.
Yeah, you get a shortened NFL career.
Career. So what I see is, yes, on one hand, I'm happy that the guys are getting rewarded for NIL. On the other hand, there's guys like me. There's guys like that I play with that sacrificed their bodies. Like when I got into the NFL, my ankles were already making noises and things like that, right? Because I did the cortisone shot. I did the knee, to play. They're like, Jerry, you got to play this week. You got to play this week. So from 17 years old, there's been that pressure to perform with your body. So yes, those guys do deserve to be taken care of. And there's guys that, like me, I came from DC. My parents had to break a piggy bank for me to get to Georgia Tech. So Georgia Tech couldn't even bring me to campus, right? So broke a piggy bank, paid for gas, dropped me off at school, didn't see my parents again for like 4 years consistently, right? I would go home, and I remember there's this one story I have. I was stuck. I used to fly standby from DC to Atlanta, and I was stuck in DC. I couldn't. They were like, and then the airline was like, oh, this is when AirTran was a thing. I remember, you guys remember that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So they're like, oh, there's a flight going to Minneapolis, and then it goes to Atlanta. And I had practice the next day, and I'm coming from home from the summer, and I get to Minneapolis. I'm stuck. There's no flight leaving to Atlanta. So here I am flying standby in the middle of Minneapolis airport. Like, what do I do? No help. So I call one of my coaches. And at this time, that would have been illegal for him to help me get to campus. If anybody would have found out about that, you know what I'm saying? So he booked me the flight. Until this day, I'll always, you know what I'm saying? I'll always love him and respect him for doing that, taking that chance. So yes, there are circumstances. So here I am, the best player on the team. I can't even get to campus the next day. So yes, NIL is good, but then at the same time, a lot of these kids, they just need guidance. They need to grow up as fast as the money's coming in. You got to grow up with it, because it can destroy your life at the same time.
Yeah.
It's crazy how much has changed. It's almost like the NCAA pulled a complete 180, because when me and Jerry were playing, it wasn't just there's no NIL, you're not going to get a paycheck. It was like if somebody who's slightly affiliated with the school slides you $200 because you can't eat,
or some gear,
or your cleats went out. If somebody slid you $200 under the table, and they found out about it, you would get crucified. So It's almost like a complete 180.
You always remember just the super minor stories where somebody got, the axe dropped on them for something so silly, right?
A pair of jeans.
And you always knew that there was way more money under the table elsewhere getting thrown around, but it was always the little stuff that seemed to get caught. But, glad we're beyond that at least.
Yeah, at least we've got some transparency nowadays.
But I do agree with Jerry that so first of all, these kids they sacrifice their bodies, and that's what to be able to play in the NFL is a blessing, and you have to have some level of luck that somewhere along the way you didn't get hurt sufficiently to prevent you from going to the next level. Same thing with baseball. That think about all the reps that you're taking in travel ball or high school ball. You get to college, right? That you don't get hurt. You can continue to progress. So the fact that the market is going to be able to reward people for being on the field and entertaining the fans, I think is great for the for the kids, for the families. But I do think that they've got to find some way to put some protections around it. That for some of the, and it's not everybody. Not everybody's getting $1 million to go play football, but they can still get enough. They can still get enough money where they can take care of their families. Where it's not one of these situations of I can't even get to campus, right? Yeah. But if you've got somebody who's going to get $250,000, to play defensive end somewhere, that if that person, that money they could get at 18 years old, it could set them up for life, right? If they're managing it properly. And so I do think that somewhere along the way, it's going to be incumbent on the institutions to provide some level of financial education, financial literacy to these kids, right? But at the same time, you can lead a horse to water, right?
Can't make it drink.
Can't make it drink.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've got enough education on the topic out there that anybody can access it if they want to. But the question is always, do you want to?
But I'm telling you, when you're 18 years old and you get stacks of cash dropped on you, and you're in college trying to have a good time, there was a Wall Street Journal article on this a couple years ago that when NIL first started, there was a year after that, these kids would get $300,000. They'd have $300,000 worth of a good time, and then April of next year, Uncle Sam's knocking on the door going, "Where's my cut?" And they're like, "Uh-oh," right? That's a problem.
I was going to say, you had the worst being drafted by a team in California.
Oof. Oof.
Yeah, that was tough. Yeah.
Well, it's bad for baseball players too. They got to file a state return in almost every state.
So you have to do that too in the NFL, right?
When you're wherever you
jock
play.
tax.
Yeah. You're only talking about 8 games as opposed to 80 games in different places. So
It's crazy.
But so Jerry, you've had the opportunity to take some of what you earned and to give back. So it's something that clients of ours ask us about a lot when it comes to their legacy, and there's tons of ways that you can donate money, that you can work with nonprofits, whatever else. Let's talk about the work that you're doing right now. So first, tell us about Glory's Hope.
So Glory's Hope Foundation I started my second year in the league. This was 2015. So I think I had one of my best seasons that year, actually. And my mom came to me towards the end of the year and said, "Hey, your sister has had this condition." Now, I didn't understand the magnitude of that condition throughout my life. I just knew my sister got sick very frequently. She used to have they call them crises. And when she has these crises, it feels like there's razor blades going through her bloodstream because she doesn't have the same. So if I get a bruise, the blood cells that come to heal that bruise, her body doesn't produce it like that. So she was constantly in the hospital, and my mom was like, "Hey, this is something you can bring awareness to, and we should start a foundation." So, some of our initiatives were, we had a blood drive. I did a blood drive in DC 2016, Howard University Hospital. I did a scholarship fund for kids with sickle cell because sometimes they'll miss months of school. So there's always this collaboration between the teachers and the administration to help them get up to speed. And it was something that gave me purpose in the midst of all that earning, and put things in perspective for me, because when you're riding that trajectory, you're on this high horse, and to be humbled with something like that in your family, was good for me. Allowed me to have like an understanding of why I was doing it, and the NFL took notice of that. I did a lot of things in the San Diego community, and the Chargers named me the Walter Payton Man of the Year that year, 2017. I got to announce our second round pick at the draft and other things like that. So for me, I remember at the time my coach was like, hey, this is going to be the best award you ever get. Everything you can do in the NFL, this is, the team is saying something about you, the city saying something about you. And it kind of just, rolled over from there. For me, I started finding more purpose in my foundation and what I was doing for other people than I was in buying a new Mercedes or buying some nice watch and buying. Now, I'm not saying these things don't have value, or there's people that invest in watches and things like that. But for me, I never was looking for the delusion of grandeur. So I was looking more for sustainability, having what I needed, my family's taken care of, and I can help other people along the way. And that's how I've looked at money. And and at this stage, it's actually molded me into a better money manager, right? Because even if I have a lot, there's still a lot I could do, right? There's still a lot I can accomplish. So the next thing on my docket was the school that my mom was like, hey, this, you grew up in this town, Ibadan, Nigeria. I've been the benefactor of a lot of people's goodwill. So DC, for example, growing up in DC, going to the DC public school system, I got a grant through the George Bush No Child Left Behind Act, right? So I benefited from that. I was able to go from one of the worst public schools in DC to Rock Creek International School. So I'm going to a school with other kids from diverse backgrounds, a lot of ambassadors' kids. We had our dance at the Colombian embassy in DC. So my whole worldview and my perspective changed. At recess, kids are encouraging me, oh, you're really good at sports and blah, blah, blah. So those moments kind of built who I am today. When I was going to high school, I got a grant from Jim Beer's foundation, Archbishop Carroll High School. So I was one of his scholars. So he paid part of my tuition to go to school, and I was able to go through Carroll and get recruited and go to the NFL. So all along my journey have been people that God has positioned to benefit me. And for me, I've always seen it as paying it back. So the money that I'm making, the money that I'm investing, how am I helping somebody else get to that next step?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So the school is called the Solace Academy, correct?
Yeah, Solace Academy.
Okay. And it's where exactly in your hometown?
It's Ibadan, Nigeria. So It's about two hours from the main city, Lagos, the capital city. And it's a fourth largest city. Education is kind of, something that's not easily accessible. And if this is something that I can take off, I can bring new ideas and ways of teaching the people that don't have access to these things. It's something that, hey, I want to be on the front line for that.
How many kids are in that school?
Right now we're about at 100, and we're trying to move to 200. And the school opened in 2021, so right after the pandemic.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Very good, man. You always hear about the Walter Payton Award as it's given out every year, and you get to hear who the nominees are and everything. And some of what these folks are doing is just incredible. The fact that they recognize where they're at and the ability that they have to go and give back like that is just so admirable. And so we certainly applaud you, man. That's great.
You have just an incredible amount of humility that's been instilled in you through your mom and dad. But I think the way that you approach money, that you've approached your success, I think it's rare that we see, in professional athletes, right? It's far less than 50%, right? So, what advice do you want to offer, or would you offer to somebody who's in a position right there? 18 years old, they're going to play ball at a D1 school. They're going to get money, NIL. They may have the opportunity to go and play in the NFL. Like, what advice do you offer to that person to set them up for success?
I definitely say the humility number one, right? Life in the NFL and football is a very humbling sport. So I myself have been humbled many times. Starting at Georgia Tech, my freshman year, Al Gro calling me out in the meeting room, making me look bad. Why are you sleeping? What's the defense? What's Maverick 2? You know what I'm saying? So. Yeah. I've been humiliated and I've been hurt and I felt bad. And there's weeks where I've gone into the facility and nobody talks to me because I'm hurt. And there's weeks, so there's been all these humbling moments, and it always benefits you when you're climbing to just keep your head down and be humble. So that's why that is the pitfall of the NIL, is that as a young man, you're making all this money. Nobody can tell you anything. You know, your advisors, your parents, you know, people feel like, and I think, I was 21 when I got into the NFL, and my older brother was 25, and he would kind of give me some advice, especially on things with women and the type of who I was as a person. I was very green. I didn't have a social life at Tech. I was very football, class, home, that type of thing. So I didn't have that experience with women. I wasn't at the parties socializing and things like that. So if a woman comes to me and she's acting a certain way and treat me a certain way, it might be hard for me to understand her true intentions. And that's the case for a lot of athletes. We're in these bubbles from 13. You're in the gym, you're at practice, you're home. You might see a woman is like, a girl is here and there, right, on the wayside type of thing. And then there's men that are actually in the world. They're actually working with women every day. They're not in the locker room like us, right? So they have a better feel for life. And my brother was one of those people, but he felt like it was hard to talk to me because I was making all that money. Yeah. He was like, oh, you weren't going to listen to me? Because I was like, bro, I'll always listen, right? Like, you know, if we're hanging out, my brother would be like, hey, be careful with that girl. Like, she's, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. She acts different around you. Like, things like that. So there's wisdom that what I've learned, my advice would be that there's wisdom all around you, and you should look for wisdom. You should look for people that are wise. So, for example, if your parents aren't good with money, right? If you don't come from parents that are investors and things like that, it will be easy for you to fall into a pitfall, right? Because you have that trust. So you'll say, okay, I'll put this money with you and we can do this together. But my advice would be look for the people that have wisdom, that have that have a certain level of accountability that they live their life with, whether they're good fathers or good, you know, for me, when I was picking an agent or a financial advisor, I don't know if it's the greatest way to pick them, but I wanted to know about their family life and things like that, whoever is handling my money. So that would definitely be my advice. Just look for wisdom as a young man. Like, even if you're making a lot of money, still go out and seek wisdom from older people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal advice. Hayes, you want to add anything to that?
No, hit the nail on the head. But I will say, speaking on that, money's an amplifier. If you're a bad person and you come into a lot of money, you're going to become an even worse person.
Well said.
Yeah. So that's probably one of the greatest pieces of advice that I got before the draft and by the people around me. But yeah, find people you trust. Find people that you're never going to be able to be 100% correct on your guess when you judge people. But find people you trust. Find people who are easy to talk to, who will tell you things, whether even if they know you're not going to like it. And know that it's going to hurt.
You can't have a yes man all the time, right? You need somebody who's going to be honest with you.
Honest advice is invaluable.
Yep, for sure. Well, hey guys, we appreciate both of you coming in here today to have this conversation. We'll throw some links in there for Jerry's foundation and for the school if anybody wants to find some more or find out some more information about those two causes if they want to support that. But both of you, thank you so much for coming in today. Great conversation around a relationship with money and some of the challenges that young people who are experiencing a lot of success can face, what some of the obstacles that they're going to have to overcome, but ultimately being surrounded by good people that are going to pour wisdom into you is going to give you the best opportunity for success. So thanks everybody for being here. That's all for this edition of Bugle Notes. We will see you here next time.